fabulous. We can see the numbers populating. It's kind of a really rewarding moment. Great, so we're live and the stream is on. Okay, fabulous, fabulous. So good morning, everyone, as you're joining the webinar. This is Kristen Nevedal with the Mendocino County Cannabis Program Department. And with us today, we have Nina Holloway assisting us with the stream and the presentation. We're going to give folks some time to join the webinar this morning. It's 8:31 now. We will start promptly at 8:35, but we want to make sure folks have time to get logged on. And so we welcome everyone. And like I said, we'll give it 4 more minutes before we start this morning's meeting. For those of you who just joined, I want to just provide a quick update. We are waiting till 8:35 to get started so folks can get logged into today's meeting. It's 8:33 now, so we'll give it 2 more minutes and then we'll go ahead and start today's meeting. All right, good morning, everyone. This is Kristen Nevedal, Director of the Mendocino County Cannabis Department, otherwise known as Cannabis Program. Thank you for joining our Friday weekly meetings. These meetings occur every Friday from 8:30 to 10 a.m. Our agenda today is to move into some updates next. We'll take just a few minutes and then we will provide some time for public comment on this morning's updates, just because I'm assuming we'll have a few questions. After updates, we'll spend some time presenting vegetation modification and prohibited tree clearing, one and the same, and then we'll have some public comments on that topic as well. And then we'll wrap up this morning's meeting by taking public comment, which is going to be based on agenda items for the future. So it's kind of the rough overview in the agenda for this morning. We will, as I mentioned, have time for public comment. Folks will want to utilize the raise hand feature in order to get into the queue for public comment for each of the public comment sections that we have. The raise hand feature is located in the toolbar, or the features bar, if you are on the Zoom app. So if you're on a device with a screen and you're using the Zoom app, the raise hand feature is generally at the bottom or the top of the screen, and it's a little hand. Just click on it, it will raise your hand. If you click on it again, it will lower your hand. And if you're calling in and not on the Zoom app, you can raise your hand by using *9. You can also lower your hand by using *9 if you're calling in. And we'll make sure that that the public is reminded of how to utilize the features as we get into each of the public comment sessions. So don't panic if you don't remember it. Currently, we will repeat this. But another good feature that I want folks to be aware of is the Q&A chat feature. Throughout the course of the meeting, at any time, please do feel free, if you're using the Zoom app, to use the chat feature. This is also in the features or the toolbar for the Zoom app, generally either at the bottom or the top of your screen. There's a little chat icon that says Q&A next to it or under it. If you just click on that icon, it pops open a chat box, and only panelists, which is Nina and I currently, will be able to see the question or the comment that comes in. But those are logged in all questions and comments that come in through the Q&A feature are logged into the Zoom platform, and we can export those. So we will export those and then in our records, couple them with today's meeting. So we have your comments or questions for reference. So if we don't get to all of them, say from the Q&A feature, no worries. We do review those, and we will see them, and we will take them into consideration. So without further ado, let's move forward. Love making sure everyone has important dates. So here are upcoming dates. Today is the 25th, and we're hosting our weekly Friday meeting from 8:30 to 10. On February 28th, that's Monday, we're currently working diligently to get out 30-day eligibility letters for those who are eligible for the corrections portal. Some of those started going out yesterday. They'll be going out today and over the course of the weekend. So those of you who are waiting for those, we'll probably have to wrap some of those up on Monday, perhaps, but we'll be sending those out next couple of days. Those will all be going out. March 4th and March 11th are both Fridays. We'll be having Friday meetings, again, from 8:30 to 10. March 16th will be our local equity entrepreneur meeting. So that is a Wednesday, and those Wednesday meetings are from 3 to 5 always. The local equity entrepreneur meeting is monthly. It's always the third Wednesday of the month. So you can just mark that on your calendar for the future. And then we have on March 18th and March 25th, those are both Fridays, kind of wrapping up the month. And we'll have public weekly meetings on both of those days as well, 8:30 to 10. March 28th will be the opening day for the corrections portal for those who are eligible. The portal will open on the 28th at 12:01 a.m. No joke, that's for real. And then it will close on April 28th at 11:59 p.m. Okay, so important dates for folks to know. The question came in about whether or not the ad hoc will be joining these meetings. The ad hoc may join these meetings, and when they are available or when they desire, they may take over a Friday meeting. So we have put it forward to them, and we will we'll see them as they are available. So let's talk a little bit about the portal itself, some portal statistics. I know folks have been kind of waiting for these. Going into the portal and coming out of the portal, we have 141 applications that were not slated to the portal because they are in good standing. Folks who submitted through the portal, we had 157 people complete their applications. An additional 6 completed applications but have vegetation modification. So they will be receiving some letters over the next couple of weeks about their veg modification. that puts us at 304 complete applications in our application pool currently. So we're hoping to get into a staffing situation and out of somewhat of the portal bog, so to speak, so that we can work on starting to review these 304 applications. I imagine that there will be additional applications out of this next pool we're going to talk about that get completed when we open the corrections portal. We have 283 applicants that came through the portal that are eligible for the 30-day corrections portal. There's an additional 33 applicants who started portal reapplications and did not complete them, so we didn't receive any materials at the MCP from them. So they are going to be eligible for the 30-day corrections portal, these 33, which means we expect 316 folks to submit corrections through the 30-day corrections portal. We did pull 34 folks out of the portal. They are not eligible for corrections because they have incomplete applications and vegetation modification. So some of those folks might end up back in the portal if we can complete the veg mod review, and it looks like those applications are viable. But for right now, we're working through those veg mod reviews, and we'll talk specifically about veg mod today. We had 14 applications denied outside of the portal. We have 16 slated for denial who came through the portal. So we had 16 folks who submitted applications to the portal, and those applications do not appear to be viable for a number of reasons. Mostly, the primary reason we're seeing that for these 16 denials is that folks appear to no longer have the original applicant. Phase 1 applications hinge or are phase 1 applicants are eligible based on proof of prior. So there's no ability to change the application or the applicant partway through that application cycle. So that accounts for the large or the majority of those 16 that will be denied first, after submitting their portal reapplication. Additionally, we'll be sending 130 denials to folks or applicants that were assigned to the portal, but failed to do any portal work at all. They didn't start an application, they didn't submit an application, they just didn't respond to their being assigned to the portal. So with that said, we're gonna be at about 160 denials early next week. We've had 21 applications withdrawn. Not all of those were withdrawn via the portal, although we did see increasing withdrawals throughout the course of the portal, and we still have some withdrawals coming in that aren't accounted for in this 21. We've had 2 applications canceled over the course of the last year. So here we're accounting for 837 applications. I believe we have 856 or so applications. I didn't put issued and approved applications on here, and then I have a couple that have nebulous standings, so that we're still kind of working through that aren't accounted for in these numbers. But I really wanted to make sure folks had portal numbers and kind of an overview of where we are in the process. We did assign 659 folks to the portal, and 529 of those folks did respond. So pretty good response rate. I'm pretty pleased. We just need to get those 316 applications that are coming back through the portal completed. That would be really delightful to get those completed. Moving on. Folks who are going to be prohibited from using the corrections portal, applications with identified vegetation modification. So we just looked at that table. If you came through the portal and we sent you a veg mod letter, we're gonna keep you out of the portal while we're completing that review. It's important that we, and I think for the applicant, that we know whether or not that application is viable before asking them to complete that application. So denied, expired, and withdrawn applications are not eligible for the corrections portal. Renewal applications, new applications, reassignment applications are not eligible for the corrections portal, nor are complete or in good standing applications, right? This really is an opportunity for folks with incomplete applications to complete those applications so that we can get them into the queue for processing. And so just the folks who receive eligibility letters will be eligible for the portal, and will only be opening the portal for those folks who receive eligibility letters. So it should make it fairly easy, hopefully, for folks, because you should not have access to the portal unless you are deemed eligible. For more information on portal, corrections portal and portal usage, you would want to see the portal application webpage on the Cannabis Program website. You can always find that by going to the Cannabis Program main page, and then on the left-hand side, there is a toolbar. And if you open the Cannabis toolbar, the very top selection currently is the reapplication portal. When you click through there, there's a ton of resources and information and materials available on that page. We will be updating it, and we are a little behind schedule on getting website updates done, largely because of limited staffing and so many gosh darn projects on everyone's plate. With that said, I want to make sure folks know that portal related questions should be emailed to Cannabis Program. There's about 4 of us that are trying to respond to questions in Cannabis Program. We are currently 7 to 10 days behind. We're getting about 50 emails a day. And they're all over the place. They're portal questions, they're phase 3 questions, they're renewal questions. We're using that email inbox as a bit of a dispatch. I've been going through there on a regular basis and assigning staff to hopefully respond to your questions. And I'll be working in that email box over the weekend. So don't be surprised if you receive emails from us over the weekend. And in some instances, I have been known to send out late night emails as I'm back in my office after dinner and spending some time with my husband. I sometimes come back and do emails. So apologies for the odd hours on the emails, but we're just trying to get through all of your questions. If you have questions specifically about your portal submission and you're preparing for the corrections portal, please do email those questions to us at cannabisprogram@mendocinocounty.org. I know that our timing is a little slow, and we're doing our best, so we ask that you bear with us. Please only put one AG number per email, unless of course you have a cultivation and a nursery site on the same parcel, then you can add both of those AGs into the same email. It's really, really incredibly helpful if you put the AG numbers in the subject line. It lets us sort the emails and make sure that if you've sent multiple emails with questions about the same AG number, we can kind of try to compress our response and hit all those questions in one response. So all of this allows staff the information necessary to review any previous portal submission you may have made that you have questions about, or questions about your checklist. We really, really want to encourage people to not call the department. I know that might sound counterintuitive, but when you call the department to ask about a portal submission, the person you get, if you can get a person, and I'll be honest with you, we don't have a full-time phone person. That task is rotated currently. So when you call the department, it's not really feasible for the person answering the phone to conduct the review while you're on the phone. A lot of times these reviews, when there's questions that come in about a portal checklist, take some time to conduct the analysis so that we can get back to you, which is why email is preferred. It allows staff to set the time aside, open documents, review documents, craft a response, and get it back to you. The same is true with dropping in to ask your portal questions. Geneva, who's in the front office, is very gracious. She's been helping folks who drop in, especially with payments. But we don't really have the ability to have that review conducted while you are at the window. So please only email us your portal questions. It will make things much more streamlined for all parties. So with that said, we have a few minutes to have some public comment about the portal specifically and the updates that we just provided. So folks, if you would like to provide public comment regarding your portal or the portal system itself, we do ask that you raise your hand. We have a short amount of time here, so I feel like we should limit the call-in time so that we can stay on agenda. I know I did put 3 minutes on the screen, but I think what we should do is probably lower that down to a minute just to see if we can try to get through the folks who have questions or comments. The first person who called in or who has a question, I'm not even sure how to identify you, caller. Your numbers that show up is -0 with an asterisk, it looks like. I will try to provide you permission to unmute. So if you called in and you are hoping to make a comment on this item, please do unmute and we'll see if we can capture our first caller or receive public comment from our first caller. Okay, caller, it looks like we should be able to hear you. You can start your comment, please.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going good. We can hear you.
You guys can hear me all right?
Yep, we can hear you.
I'm just wondering when you guys got to hire more people to take care of this situation so us family farms can get back to business.
Great. Would you like me to respond to that, caller? Is that your comment?
Yes. When are you going to hire more people to help us family farms take care of business?
Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and remute your phone and I will respond to that. So we are doing a pretty significant staff up currently. We will be, we just finished interviewing around 40 people for 7 planner positions. So we will be staffing planners and planner techs over the next several weeks. And our RFP for contract labor should be going out next week. So we are just on the cusp of hiring a significant number of people for assistance. So I'm pretty excited about that. Now we just need the office space and the desks to put them in. Okay, our next caller this morning is going to be Monique Ramirez. Monique, I have allowed you to unmute, so you should be able to go ahead and unmute and start your comment.
Good morning, Kristen. Thank you so much. I am just curious, for the people that didn't even respond at all to get into this portal, do you guys have any sense of like why that is? Because it's such a high number. I'm just wondering if maybe those people don't have the right email address on file anymore with the county, or just, I'm just really concerned and hoping that, you know, we just don't leave anyone behind that has literally no clue about this portal even opening because they're not tapped into reading the newspaper and maybe they're not connected via Facebook. And, you know, there's so many resources online to let us know about all of this stuff. But I'm just curious if the county and the program has kind of maybe investigated just slightly into it just because that number is so high. And then also if you could speak to the people that are ineligible for the portal with the 30-day correction notice, if you could speak to the few that are not eligible for that, what those reasons are, just so we have a little bit better insight, that'd be great. And I also just want to thank you for responding to emails even late night. I super appreciate it. And I know you guys are getting a lot of questions. So thank you so much for being so responsive, at least for me personally. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So let me just do a quick overview of what has happened with folks who are ineligible. Folks who are ineligible because of veg modification, largely. Those are the largest number of ineligible corrections portal applicants. And the reason why is because we didn't really feel that it was appropriate for us to ask folks to spend money to complete their portal application. Even though there's no fee with us, we recognize that there's consultants and other fees that might come up. And so we don't want them to spend additional money, resources, or time on completing that application when we're not sure if there's a viable path to move that application forward. So we pulled them out of the portal to hopefully work with them to address the vegetation modification that we've identified. And then if they can move past the vegetation modification, we'll work with them to set up a timeline and a process by which they can complete that application. Again, there's a number of folks, about 16 or so, that are being denied through the portal. That is largely due to no longer having the original applicant, which we cannot transfer an application. So that is the primary issue there. The 130 that did not attend the portal, I think, are largely have not been responsive to the department since applying. We could have incorrect email addresses for them. That is possible. A number of them did receive corrections letters that were returned to the department and or picked up by an individual and not responded to. So there's a long history in that 130 pool of non-responsiveness to the department. Additionally, we notified in 3 print newspapers. We notified via Facebook, also at board meetings. We sent emails through Canon Notes. We sent emails to every applicant and agent that we had on record. And we sent an email to everyone listed with a Cal Cannabis license. So I'm assuming that those folks don't have emails in any of those arenas, and or maybe they aren't cultivating or they're choosing not to participate in the future. So I'm not sure how else we would have contacted them short of driving to their farm to deliver a notice. So our last public comment for this session or section will be Michael Katz. Michael Katz, I have allowed you to unmute your device. So please, you may unmute your device and begin your comment.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate these meetings. Quick question regarding the portal notification. It sounded like the emails to folks who will be going through the portal were going to be sent out over the next several days into next week. I'm just wondering if all of those will be sent by February 28th, which is ostensibly the 30-day window for it to open, or will some people be notified after the 28th of the March 28th deadline?
Any additional comments? And then I'll respond, Michael.
Well, that's my only question at this time.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. We are planning on notifying today. We will also be, I'll be working this weekend, so I will get through it this weekend. Rest assured. So if I have to work Saturday and Sunday to get through those notifications, that is what will happen. So yes, we will have those notifications out by Monday. Ensuring that folks who are eligible have 30 days to work towards completing their corrections. I apologize for the slideshow reverting back to the beginning, but let's go on and talk about our next topic so we can stay on time. I do see that the first caller has their hand raised. I'm going to leave your hand raised when we get to public comment around vegetation modification caller. We'll take you first on that public comment section. So moving forward to have some conversation about vegetation modification. So vegetation modification, I know folks have been a bit confused about the nomenclature, and I suppose I could have added slides to help with that, but I'm just going to verbally or orally explain what we're thinking here. So the ordinance does have a very rigorous prohibition on tree removal, and it's not tied to the size of the tree, right? It's tied to the species of tree. So it's really a prohibition on species removal. might be a more accurate way to frame the conversation. When we send a vegetation modification letter out, and when we identify vegetation modification, really what we've noticed is through aerial imagery that vegetation has been modified in and or around the cultivation site itself. And cultivation site is a broad term, right? Because we're not just talking about where plants might live or where processing, drying, trimming, curing, packaging might occur. It also applies to all aspects of the development of that cultivation site. So developed water sources, developed water storage, ponds, if you put in a hammerhead turnaround. So the areas that are specific to your cultivation operation are all included in the review for potential violations of removing specific species. And we'll talk about those specific species in a moment here. And we'll talk a bit about the letters more thoroughly before we go to public comment. And I imagine we'll have very robust public comment about this section. So I want to try to get through the presentation without rushing, but providing us enough time to actually facilitate and have robust public comment about it. And I will do my best throughout that public comment to try to answer questions. Some questions may not be answerable at this time. I just want to temper expectations a little bit. We will do our best here. So in the ordinance, section 10A17-040, the general limitations on cannabis, on cultivation of cannabis section, K, subsection K, really does lay out the prohibition. So the prohibition is, there's a prohibition on the removal of any commercial tree species and a prohibition on the removal of any true oak or tan oak for the purposes of developing a cannabis cultivation site. So that's an absolute prohibition. The prohibition does not include pruning of prohibited species, true oaks or tan oaks, for the purposes of maintenance. It also does not include, right, the removal of these species if the removal is necessary to address safety or disease concerns, right? So say CAL FIRE came through and cleared a fire break, you would not be penalized for the removal of prohibited species because of that fire break, but you would be asked to show that the trees were removed by CAL FIRE for purposes of safety, aka the fire break, right? Disease concerns. I know that folks started in this program in 2017 and applied through 2019, right, in windows, so to speak. So going backwards is really hard, right? We're looking back in time. And so if folks didn't conduct their removal with documentation, it makes it incredibly challenging to go forward. And in some cases, likely impossible to move forward. Some folks may have removed trees because of disease concerns. So if you had pine beetles or some sort of sudden oak death or, whatever disease that may have killed or damaged trees, hopefully you documented that because that would be a cause for removing trees. But again, we would need the documentation showing that. We'll talk more about this in a moment. So section 10A17-090, subsection T, as in Tom, states that no application shall be approved which identifies or would require the removal of tree species listed in K, right? On or after May 4th. So if you did the conducted removal on or after May 4th, it's pretty much a zero tolerance prohibition. There are these narrow pathways for safety and disease concerns, but it is really a rigorous prohibition that the Board of Supervisors put into the ordinance. Things are a little bit different if you removed trees before May 4th. And the significance of the May 4th date is that May 4th is the date that the ordinance was implemented. So May 4th, 2017 is when 10A17 was implemented and became a regulation for cultivation and nursery operations. So for folks who removed trees prior to May 4th of 2017, the department is asking, based on the ordinance, that the applicant provide evidence that no trees were unlawfully removed, right? And that evidence showing that no trees were unlawfully removed may include a less than 3 acre conversion or a less than 3 acre conversion exemption, right? We also would need evidence, credible evidence that the trees were removed prior to May 4th of 2017. And we heard a lot during the, I guess it was on the 9th, the February 9th meeting, that the evidence for the timing is really hard for folks and then it can be expensive. I don't disagree with that. We recognize that. We don't have the tools currently either. We are conducting the reviews for the veg mods that we sent out in a peer review format. So as planners receive the information from those initial veg mods that went out, we'll be scheduling time for all of the planners and myself and probably our program administrator to discuss the findings or what they've discovered from the information turned in. We are prepared to reach out to code enforcement for land vision images if we have folks that are close to that May 4th date or we're concerned that the evidence might not be credible. And I think in the future, as we get satellite imagery in place, land vision and planet will have much better ability to assist folks with establishing that timeline. The planet imagery will be receiving archived images. So we should have years and years of footage from years ago. And those have been talking to informational services, and we're planning on making that imagery available to the public through the GIS platform. So I would, I know the timing's a little crunchy here, but come May, early May, late April, those images should be available to the public via the GIS platform. So going back to the conversation about tree removal prior to May 4th of 2017, if during the review of the application and the materials provided by the applicant regarding vegetation modification, there are questions or we're not sure whether trees were removed lawfully, we're supposed to deny the application. However, we do have the ability to, with the permission of the applicant, to send the application out for referral. So this next section under 090 subsection T allows or provides for the ability for the department to refer the application to CAL FIRE, the North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board, and CDFW. We will not be doing that referral unless the applicant agrees to it. And should the applicant not be able to show that the trees were removed lawfully and chooses to move forward with the referral, the department would package the application materials, send it forward to the 3 agencies noted here, and then wait for a response. And if the agencies come back and say they were unlawfully removed, but mitigations could go into place, then we would work with the applicant in this instance to hopefully they would be willing to and able to complete those mitigations, which would then give us the ability to issue a permit for folks who conducted tree removal prior to May 4th of 2017. So a little bit confusing because we have 2 different pathways depending on when tree removal occurred. But it is what's in the ordinance, so we're trying to work through what is provided to us in 10A17. Just a quick couple of slides identifying the types of trees we're talking about. So we're really talking about commercial species in addition to true oaks and live oaks. And I'm sorry, true oaks and tan oaks. My apologies for the misreference there. And then we have these coastal forest district commercial species lists. These are produced by CAL FIRE, so we're just basing the commercial species lists or considerations off of what CAL FIRE has provided for commercial species. So there's this list for the coastal district, and then there's the northern forest district, which has this additional list. So it's a pretty robust list of species that are prohibited. And, so I hope folks take it into consideration if you're doing any sort of tree work, document, and make sure that that tree work is conducted by a professional who's documenting every species you might possibly modify or need to remove if you have a disease issue or a safety issue. The vegetation modification letters specifically have 15-day notices on them. We really, when writing this, we did not anticipate that folks would be trying to create a list of species impacted by the modification post-harvest. It's been a little alarming how many folks have pushed back on the 15-day veg mod letter timeline because they think they're going to get a licensed professional to come out months or years after the timber or the species have been harvested to verify what may or may not have been harvested. We're not, at this point, after talking to County Council on this issue, we will not be considering post-harvest species lists credible. So we're sticking with the 15 days and we will not be considering post-harvest species lists credible. So the two things we're asking for in the veg modification letter is, number one, credible information showing when the modification occurred. So we really want either the receipt from the licensed professional who conducted the work showing that the work was conducted in this time frame. Sometimes if you have a 3-acre conversion, the information from that 3-acre conversion, the various inspections and sign-offs will provide us a timeline of when the modification occurred. Sometimes people have time-stamped aerial imagery and or photo documentation from the work that they did. We would like to review that. If you have it, please do send it. And then also, if your vegetation modification was due to a CAL FIRE fire break, please do gather that information from CAL FIRE and get it over to us. And then we have had some folks who have had significant vegetation modification around their cultivation area because of PG&E. We have collected a few PG&E letters from folks, and those are credible evidence. Those do qualify as credible evidence, telling us when the veg modification occurred. And because it's a safety issue, PG&E clearing their power lines is a safety issue. If PG&E or CAL FIRE in their fire break cleared prohibited species, it would fall into safety reasons and would not be necessarily a prohibited action. We are also asking in that veg modification letter documentation demonstrating what species of vegetation was modified. Again, we are not considering post-harvest created lists of species credible. It's just not, with a ministerial program, it's too much to try to work through, to be honest with folks. So really, if you didn't document your species when you conducted the vegetation modification, it's going to be very hard to move forward here. If when looking at these pieces, you feel that you're not going to move forward and you want to go ahead and withdraw your application or your permit, You can use the withdrawal form. It is located on the Cannabis Program website on the forms page. That is it for the presentation on veg modification. It's going to give us plenty of time to have some robust conversation, approximately 30 minutes. Quick reminder of upcoming dates, right? We should have portal notifications out by no later than close of business on the 28th. We'll be opening the corrections portal on March 28th, and we'll be closing it on April 28th. So with that said, I'm sure we will have robust public comment on this topic. So we are going to transition to public comment on vegetation modification. I'm going to go ahead and set up the timer. Because we have so much time, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to reset this timer to 3 minutes. I think that makes the most sense currently. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to allow our very first caller, gentleman who called us earlier. I have provided you the ability to unmute your device. So if you'd like to go ahead and start your comments, you have the floor.
Thanks for having me again. I'm just wondering if I'm still allowed to dam up the river and use it for watering, or am I still able to use my water trucks?
If you'd like me, is that your comment? Because I can go ahead and respond to you during this time if you have no additional comments.
Yeah, because you guys are making it illegal for me to get water up here, and that's not very good for the plants. We're in a drought.
So let me go ahead and respond to you. So any sort of diversion of a waterway, whether that is a damming of the river or putting a line into the river, is likely prohibited. You would have to check in with the State Water Resource Control Board. It is possible that in some instances you may be able to procure a water right. But also Department of Fish and Wildlife has some jurisdiction over surface water diversions, which is what drawing from a river, a stream, or a waterway would be. And so you may be able to draw water with approval from Department of Fish and Wildlife and the State Water Resource Control Board. But as a surface water diversion, it is highly likely that you would only be able to draw water during the high flow months. And then you would have to store that water from, I believe it is May to November, in order to utilize it for your cannabis cultivation. So it is not necessarily the department that has authority over surface water diversions. It is state agencies. So we check for compliance with the state regulations around water usage, but we don't really establish those regulations at all. As far as water trucks are concerned, if you are utilizing hauled water, you will need to provide a will serve letter showing who the water hauler is, the license number for the water hauler. It might just be like the license number associated with having a water truck because non-potable water sources do not need a permit at the state level for providing water services or hauled water. But the the hauled water letter would also need to include the source of water. So we would need to know where your water hauler is acquiring the water that they're bringing to you, how much water they're bringing to you, and on what intervals they'll be bringing that to you. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and lower that caller's hand. And going on to our next caller today, next caller is going to be Lauren Mendelson. Lauren, I have provided you the ability to unmute, so please do unmute your device and you can begin your comment.
Okay, thank you. I have 4 questions. I'm going to go to get through them all in 3 minutes. So the first one, the ordinance, actually, it says that the county shall defer to the resource agencies. in terms of determining whether or not there was prohibited veg modification. So it sounds like you said you're only doing that if the applicant approves. That sounds like that does not fit with the ordinance. So it says shall. Are you doing that or not? Second question, does the cannabis program know that less than 3 acre exemptions cannot be granted retroactively? So if the person didn't know about this when they took down, if they were eligible for that exemption but didn't apply for it then, they cannot get it now. Do you know that? Next question, why does CAL FIRE have to be the one to remove the trees if they were done for fire mitigation purposes? There's a state law, Public Resource Code 4291, that requires homeowners in certain places to maintain the defensible space. It doesn't say they have to hire CAL FIRE to do it. Why is that a requirement? And final question, what about people who were denied in the renewal process for something that you're now giving people in the portal a chance to submit corrections for? Will applicants who had permits and now are being denied for one of these issues, but it was a renewal, will they have a chance to submit corrections or appeal or go through some other kind of corrective process so they can stay in the system? Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. I'll do my best to respond to those questions. So first one, shall defer to agencies. So the ability for us to refer out to agencies is only relevant if the tree clearing occurred before May 4th of 2017. And there are questions about the lawful nature of that tree removal. We had preferred automatic referral that went with the shall. However, we also had feedback from folks that they were concerned that such a referral could create incredibly punitive violations for their applicant. And so we took kind of a middle road where we're not going to do that referral unless the applicant would like that referral to be conducted because they want to pursue being granted a permit. Less than 3 acre conversion exemption not being available after the fact. We are aware of that. However, we still need to follow the ordinance and conduct analysis. And if folks didn't get a 3 acre conversion or a 3 acre conversion exemption, we can defer to the referral process to see if there are mitigations that should be put in place depending on what the agencies how the agencies feel about the modification that occurred. Why can CAL FIRE and CAL FIRE only create the fire break? I think that this is going to be tricky. So I know that there is the fire clearing that folks need to conduct around their homes and their homesteads. When we're considering a fire break, oftentimes what we've experienced so far is folks have a cultivation site. They clear a huge ring around their cultivation site. We've had this happen in a number of situations. They expand their cultivation site into that cleared area, and then they try to tell us it's a fire break. But then there's their home and their structures are under trees, right? So I don't know how we would consider that a fire break. And we're looking for verification of what was modified, when it was modified, why it was modified from licensed professionals. So again, we will be deferring back to CAL FIRE. I am confused about the questions about denied during the renewal process versus the portal. We have a number of folks who had veg modification identified as we were reviewing their application for renewal. We will be working with them through the same process with using the same considerations that we are utilizing today for veg modification applicants in the portal. So, and then whether or not there will be an appeals process, please do review the agenda for the May 3rd. I want to say it's May 3rd. I'm sorry, not May 3rd, March 3rd meeting. Next Wednesday, we'll be having a special meeting about cannabis specifically with the Board of Supervisors. And on that meeting, there is an appeals item. It's actually the second, Wednesday, March 2nd. That discussion will be before the Board of Supervisors. Okay, going on to our next caller. Amy Nguyen, you are going to be our next commenter. I have given you permission to unmute, which you have, so please, you have the floor.
Hello, Kristen and team. Thank you so much for all of the, above and beyond time and effort that you've put into this process. It's appreciated. I have I have 3 questions, but you can, I'll let you know when I'm done. With the referral process, when someone asks to have their VegMod referred out to the agencies, you're describing that there may be some mitigations that would be possible. I just want to confirm that that's within this this 10A17 process. And then if someone will not be permitted to perform mitigations, can you confirm that it's correct that that's not the end of their possibilities? That just means that they would need to go through what was the phase 3 process, because that process allows for, the different levels of environmental determination. So those are my 2 main questions. And then when you have a chance, if you could show those species lists again so I could do screenshots, that would be great. Thank you very much. That's it.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. So I'm going to go ahead and disable your microphone. And then I'm going to do my best to try to respond. So the referral process is just for folks who conducted vegetation modification prior to May 4th of 2017 and could not provide us credible evidence that that was a lawful modification process. So in that instance, we would be able to refer with the permission of the applicant to the agencies, the North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board, CAL FIRE, and California Department of Fish and Wildlife. Those agencies are listed in the ordinance, so that's why we're looking at those agencies and those agencies only. That referral process, we would send the referral out to the agencies. And then the agencies would be able to say, oh, no, that was lawful and we have no concerns, then we would move the permit forward. If the agency said, well, it wasn't lawful, and then there's violations that the applicant could pay, right, to clear, and then to clear those violations, we would move the application forward if the applicant paid the violations, right, and or conducted any mitigations that the agencies asked for during that referral process. So that's how the referral process works currently. And then can folks who are in violation of the tree clearing prohibition apply under phase 3? I think that is possible. And I think that there's possibly also some instances in which folks may have veg modification issues under phase 1, but may have other areas where they can conduct cultivation or, stay out of that cleared area. So, it's going to be site specific. So it's a little hard to create kind of a really broad overarching response to this question. And it's also possible that folks could apply in phase 3 for a newly developed site that doesn't include any sort of vegetation modification that's prohibited. So I think it is possible to utilize phase 3. Phase 3 is not a discretionary program. We don't have the ability to work with the applicant under phase 3 to conduct mitigations that are otherwise not available under phase 1. The tree prohibition, the sensitive or the species tree clearing prohibition, that is still in place in phase 3. So as a phase 3 applicant, you cannot receive a permit if your application proposes vegetation modification of prohibited species. So it's really, is there a way to get the applicant out of the area or areas where vegetation modification has occurred? That's going to be crucially important if there is a violation of that prohibition. Okay. Let's see here, resetting the clock. Our next caller is a phone-in caller dialed in. And the last 4 digits of that phone number are 8120. So caller 8120, I have provided you the ability to unmute. So you have the floor if you'd like to unmute and start your comment. Caller, phone number ending in 8120. You have the floor if you'd like to unmute your microphone. Okay, let's see. I do not have the ability. Let's see, I'm going to ask to unmute you. Maybe that helped. Okay. Caller ending in 8120. I'm going to go ahead and move to the next caller. I'm going to leave your hand up so we can come back to you towards the end of our queue to see if we can get you unmuted. With that said, our next caller today is going to be Michael Katz. Michael, you can unmute your microphone and begin your comment, please.
Hello, thank you so much. Yeah, lots going on here. Wondering regarding specifically about the satellite imagery that you mentioned that was going to potentially be made available to the public. I was wondering if there are safety or security concerns around that, and if so, how the program would be considering addressing those. So I believe these are obviously images that are not simply available on Google Earth. And so that's my first question.
Yes, why don't you run through your comments and then I'll do my best to respond to them at the end of your comment time.
Okay, well, that's the first question. Additionally, I think that there is, I think as you've noted, there's a lot of concern for this particular program. I'm wondering where the 15-day requirement came from and how that was determined and why it is intractable. So those are my primary questions at this time.
Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and disable your permission to talk. And I'm going to go ahead and lower your hand and I'm going to do my best to respond to you. Satellite imagery. There may be concerns, and I think the public, if you have concerns about having historic imagery available through the public GIS portal, you should probably send us those concerns, cannabisprogram@mendocinocounty.org. We felt, and we do feel that this is appropriate and would be helpful for applicants in all sorts of arenas. When it comes to developing maps, working on your Appendix G to show existing structures, working on vegetation modification, clarification, so on and so forth. Humboldt County currently does this as well. So they have on their GIS platform in the layers, folks can click through the years to see if there's images of their parcel in 2016 or 2015 or whatever it may be. And that is because they've plugged the planet satellite imagery into their GIS system. So we were looking to do the same thing to try to provide additional resources and tools to the public. Why and how we got to 15 days on the VegMod letters. We got to 15 days because we were asking, and we are asking folks to provide the information they have, right? We chose 15 days because we didn't see the need to have 30 days for folks to provide information that they technically should already have, right? So they should have the information from the work that they conducted in those work orders. So that is how we got to 15 days. Okay, we are going to go ahead and move on to our next caller. Our next caller is Julia. Julia, you are able to unmute your device and begin your comment.
Thank you, Kristen, and thank you for holding these weekly meetings and bringing up topics that most definitely need to be discussed. My first question is, what if the trees were removed prior to your ownership and or control of the property, which in one case of one of my clients that received that letter, that did happen. And then my second question is, in your original meeting with the ad hoc committee, you stated the 15 days are to get back with a timeline of when we will have the information to you. And now you're stating that the 15 days, if you don't have the information, you're out. And so I'm confused because we can supply the information on the 21st of March because our arborist that's licensed is out teaching a class until then, out of town. So if you could help me understand those, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Julia. So I think if your arborist is out of town and conducted the work at the site in question and won't be in town to provide you the receipt from when that work was conducted, send us that email and let us know, right? What we're not considering credible evidence is post-harvest analysis of the species. So if you're waiting for an arborist to come into town so you can send them out to the location to try to put together a list of what may have been removed some time ago, that's a moot point because we won't be accepting those analyses as credible evidence of the species removed. And I think when we were talking about with the ad hoc on February 9th, the 15 days, we really do want people get that information into us. If you're in a situation where you're like, oh gosh, darn it, I don't have my receipts and my paperwork from having the work conducted, and nobody's going to be able to get back to me with those receipts until a later date after the 15 days, let us know that so we can work with you to reset our clock to know that your arborist who conducted the work won't be returning until said date, and then the receipt will be forthcoming, in the next few days after they return to their office. So I think that answered the questions. At least that's what I wrote down. So with that said, I think we should go to our next caller, which is the first gentleman who called in appears to have another question. So, sir, I have provided you the ability to unmute your microphone and start your comments.
I'm just wondering if you're going to allow people that are getting licenses that continuously fail laboratory testing to continue to get those licenses.
Yes, because we are not regulating laboratory testing. So that's not within our purview, nor do we take in the laboratory tests and have a record of those analyses. So that is not within our purview for review or consideration for permitting. I'm going to go ahead and see if caller ending in 8120 would like to comment. I see that your hand is still raised. I'm going to allow you to talk. So you should be able to unmute your phone, caller. If you are having a hard time unmuting, *6 will unmute you. I'm sorry I didn't mention that earlier, but caller ending in 8120, you should be able to unmute your device. If you're having problems unmuting, you can use the *6 feature to unmute. Okay, still challenges with unmuting, so I'm going to go ahead and disable talking. Caller, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to lower your hand. If you do want to get back into the queue, please do use *9 to raise your hand. Our next speaker is going to be Hannah Nelson. Hannah, you should be able to unmute your microphone at this time. There you go.
Thank you. I have quite a few questions and I hope I can get through them. First is, what are you using to determine whether or not the vegetation removal or modification was for purpose of developing a cultivation site, or if it was for safety or disease? The ordinance does not specify the need for a licensed professional to have conducted that work. And so what other proof that those legitimate exceptions were satisfied is acceptable besides a licensed professional having conducted the work at the time, besides PG&E, for example? Also, just to address the issue that came up before about 15 days, it's not just professionals going out to determine after the fact species. There's also questions regarding the polygons that your staff had created and whether or not they're accurate, particularly since Google Earth and NAIP, sometimes the images from year to year are different angles and create different cultivation areas. on the ground and verifying whether or not those are consistent with the cultivation areas. There's also the question of if additional imaging is going to be made available to the public in the future, and potentially if the Board of Supervisors does approve going forward with the appeals process, that is, are you going to hold, for those reasons or any other reasons, any denials based on this vegetation modification until after that information is available? If there is a post-harvest analysis of species conducted that flips the kind of burden onto the applicant, where the ordinance itself really does not mandate that. And I'm curious where that flipping of the burden to provide basically a laundry list of every vegetation that might have been removed that was not prohibited, and why is that the standard? In addition, the question about why you did not notify people of the notice of application stay and only notified people of the ability to withdraw. And then what will be denied if you don't, quote, address the concerns noted above as stated in the letter? Are there other?
All right, that was time. I'm going to try to get through these questions that we have so far, and we only have a few minutes left, so I want to make sure we get to all of the speakers, and there's a handful of folks that have not been able to comment yet. What about determining for purpose of cultivation site regarding safety and disease? So we are relying on licensed professionals. So we would like confirmation or credible evidence from licensed professional verifying that the vegetation modification was conducted due to safety and or disease issues. If you have other information, I would suggest that you send it, right? So if you had a massive snowstorm and you took a bunch of photos of all of the broken, dead, downed trees, and they're time-stamped, and you can send those, do send those. But we are really looking for credible evidence from licensed professionals. 15 days. If you have questions about the staff's polygons, please do email cannabisprogram@mendocinocounty.org. We are forwarding those questions over to the staff who conducted or put together the VegMod letters. And they have worked with a number of applicants to clarify the polygons and help them understand what it is that we think we might be seeing. So again, please do email those questions in. If additional imagery is available, and then we have this appeals process, are we going to hold denials? We are not holding denials, but just because the timer runs out on the VegMod, we're still doing reviews. So timer runs out this week on VegMod, say it runs out today, we are peer reviewing all of the information that came in for these 30-some applicants. So it's going to take us some time to get through that information and consider it. And then also send emails back, in hopes that we'll be able to get additional information from applicants as necessary. So we'll be holding for appeals. I don't know the answer to that question. We'll see what comes up on the 2nd of during the appeals conversation with the board. I imagine, but cannot guarantee, that any new appeals process that goes into place would have some sort of opportunity available for denials that previously did not have access to an appeals process. It is part of the conversation we've been having about appeals as we ramp up to having a public conversation with the board about appeals. So we'll have to circle back on that topic at a later date. Again, we are not considering post-harvest species analysis to be credible evidence. And of course, if folks would like to file a notice of application stay because they feel that they need the time to gather additional information and or to complete their application, a notice of application stay would be also an appropriate way to stay off the denial process and have additional time to work through the issues at hand. Our next caller is Marie Livesey. I apologize, Marie, for not pronouncing your last name correctly. You should be able to unmute your microphone and start your comment. Marie, would you like to unmute your microphone and start your comment? If you're on a phone, it is *6 to unmute.
Look,
all right, I think we've got you. Yep, I think we can hear you, Marie.
Sorry about that. I appreciate I've taken up extra time because of it. I had lowered my hand because many of my questions were answered. You answered with Hannah's, but not all of them. So I think my question is will you be reviewing her questions and posting what the answers are, as well as some of the answers to the other participants, somewhere where I can go online and see what the answers are?
Is that it for your comments, Marie? Because I'm happy to respond to that, but I want to get through your comments first, so just for sake of time.
Well, okay. Well, it is regarded to regards much of what Hannah said. My concerns are about windfall, and cleaning up after windfall, which I made phone calls. This is, I think, maybe 2 years ago when that big storm was that Highway 101 was covered. I called the county, I called the water board, I called CDFW and CAL FIRE to make sure I didn't need any permitting or any special attention to this. And so, again, this is my concern.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and respond to your questions. I am disabling your speaking opportunity, and I'm going to go ahead and lower your hand. So reviewing questions and posting them. So with each of these public meetings, we will be reviewing the questions that came in through the Q&A feature. We do hope to get into a process of publishing those questions as applicable and as appropriate and posting responses to those questions. However, we do have significant amounts of website development to conduct before we can get to that place. And with limited staffing, I would not expect that to be accomplished immediately. So my apologies there. Windfall, we do recognize that there was a number of folks that suffered from a lot of tree breakage and damage with snowfalls over the years. If you have windfall occurring and or weather damage to trees around your cultivation site, we do strongly recommend that you take time-stamped photos and document. Video is also incredibly helpful. The other thing that some folks have done is, and I know that this can be challenging, is they have requested inspection of their site before they start the cleanup on windfall. DFW, North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board, and CAL FIRE are not privy to the rules and regulations always associated with 10A17. So receiving clearance from them does not guarantee that you would be in the clear for the prohibition stated in 10A17. So again, documentation. Going to our next caller is Jason Horst. Jason, I have provided you permission to unmute, so you can unmute your device and start your comments, please.
Thank you very much. So, on the documentation, front, I wanted to ask a few questions. One, can you please articulate what are the specific standards that MCP is using to assess whether evidence it receives that no trees were removed unlawfully is sufficient? Next, the regulation requires only that there be evidence that no trees were unlawfully removed. Why is a declaration from the applicant to this effect insufficient to meet this requirement? if the MCP is accusing applicants of unlawful tree removal, why is the burden not on MCP to prove unlawful removal rather than on the applicant to prove the negative? Next, I'm wondering if MCP and or county council have evaluated whether denying renewal applications for permits that it is granted multiple times based on evidence that it never notified permit holders or applicants that they would have to preserve, and that it is today acknowledged that MCP itself is not capable of obtaining, comports with the applicant's procedural due process rights, given, in particular, given that, the applicants likely have vested property rights in these permits. And if you bear with me for one moment, you reiterated earlier that MCP is requiring licensed professionals, evidence from licensed professionals, but I think that the question that was asked, and I'll ask again, is where this requirement comes from, because it doesn't appear to be in the ordinance, and what we're seeing is that a number of the licensed professionals who may qualify to meet this requirement are saying that it is essentially impossible to provide some of the opinions they're being asked to provide ex post. And so again, if this is evidence that MCP does not have, that MCP cannot obtain, and that the applicants and permit holders were never told that they were going to need to preserve, nor is it anywhere in the ordinance that this is a requirement. Where do these requirements come from? What's the basis for them? And with that, I'll give the rest of the time.
All right, thank you for that. I'm going to do a quick response. We're not going to hear comments from folks who previously commented, because we have a number of folks who have not been able to comment on the list. So I just want to make sure that folks are aware of that. Standards regarding unlawful removal. The ordinance, I want to say with all of this, so putting together the vegetation modification policy, getting the vegetation modification letters out, we have spent hours and hours over the course of a couple of months working with county council and outside council, Abbott and Kinderman, on shaping this so that we understand how to conduct the reviews. So this is not a policy that MCP developed in a vacuum by themselves. It has been developed largely and pretty much exclusively via conversation and with guidance from county council and outside council, Abbott and Kinderman. So the proof of burden is on the applicant. So it really is up to the applicant to determine or to provide credible evidence about what was removed, when it was removed, and if it was removed before May 4th of 2017, that it was removed in a lawful manner. If that credible evidence is not available to the MCP, then we can work with the applicant to conduct a referral to determine, the agencies will then determine the lawful or unlawful nature of the removal and whether or not mitigations are necessary. And so declaration from the applicant, county council and outside council advised the MCP to utilize licensed professionals for the providing of credible evidence. So that is why we aren't taking declarations from applicants, is because we have been provided guidance suggesting that we should consider licensed professionals as the credible source for providing the evidence. Renewal applications, we have worked with county council and outside council on this issue specifically. So there is no vested right in renewal applications. Each and every application for renewal is a new permit application. So ministerial permits do not provide the applicant or the permit holder a vested land right to conduct said activity. There's also no applicant or permit holder rights if the application of the permit was issued erroneously. There is no vested right in that permit. And if the erroneous nature of the first permit perhaps is noticed or detected during the review of the renewal application, again, we're looking at a new permit. And so the application can be denied based on previously unidentified information. Okay, getting back to our queue, and we are really rapidly running out of time. My apologies. So we're going to have to try to move forward in somewhat of a quicker manner. Our next commenter is Emily Hackman. Emily, we have, you should be allowed to, there you go. I think we have you if you'd like to start your comment.
Yes, I have a quick question. So I'm not really entirely sure how the prohibition on tree species and the lawful removal of trees sort of works together. So in the case of our client, they have a less than 3 acre conversion. The trees were removed prior to May 4th, 2017. And the conversion was specifically to develop the residential site, but the trees removed were on the species list. So I just kind of, if you could clarify, if the trees, the fact that the trees were lawfully removed, if that's sufficient here to provide that documentation, and if that client will be allowed to move forward.
I can't speak to whether or not the client will be allowed to move forward without actually reviewing all of the considerations of that application and the documentation. But if the trees were felled before May 4th of 2017 and that felling was conducted via a less than 3 acre conversion, there should be a pathway to move that applicant forward. But again, we need to review the materials before we can make a full determination. Okay, our next speaker is going to be Ron Edwards. Ron, you should be able to go ahead and unmute your device and start your comment.
Yeah, I know that,
Oh, Ron, can you get closer to your microphone? We cannot hear you.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay. We have these outside counsel referrals. Is there a location where those can be reviewed? Because we can look at the ordinance and see what the ordinance says. And so we've got these new, it seems to be as following this interpretations of that. The second question or comment is that, isn't it clear of PG&E's easement or historical access to a site? So in other words, if you're seeing the trees are removed within the easement, is that the qualification to state that, as well as showing PG&E's access for things that they may have cleared? Because getting a statement from PG&E is like pulling teeth. It's very difficult, and the only place I've seen that happen is the Board of Supervisors calling PG&E in to get these questions answered, because as a general public, it's really difficult to get that done. So those are my comments, questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. So we will be putting up a VegMod webpage that will provide additional clarification and some additional guidance. It will kind of document what we've been talking about here in these meetings. So that is forthcoming. But again, we are behind on web edits as we are incredibly short-staffed, and I have to create the content for those pages and then get that content reviewed by county council and outside council before we can post it. PG&E, when PG&E conducts tree clearing work on your property, they provide you a letter telling you that they will be conducting tree work on said days. That letter is what we are looking for. And so we have received a number of those letters. They are required to provide notification. So folks should be notified ahead of time before they start the work. And if for some reason you are pulling teeth with PG&E to get that notification, you would want to respond to the department, tell them that you are working diligently with PG&E to acquire the notification letter that you no longer have access to for one reason or another. And then we would work with you on resetting the timeline for you to get that notification to the department. Okay, our next caller is going to be Margot Advisors. Margot Advisors, you should be able to unmute your device. Okay, great. Would you like to start your comment?
Sure, Kristen. Hi, it's Kelly with Margot Advisors. One comment, two questions. First comment is April 1st to November is the forbearance period for the State Water Board. So that was earlier in the discussion. I just wanted to clarify that. My first question is, how are you defining the term removal? The reason I bring that up is with CAL FIRE timber conversions, removal is when you remove the roots of the tree. If the tree is simply cut, such as for firewood, it's not considered a conversion. And so when you say tree removal is prohibited, I was just curious how you're defining the term removal. My second question is, Humboldt County allows applicants to hire a licensed forester, submit a timberland resource management plan to remediate any prior tree removals. So that if a farmer cut down an oak tree, they're generally required to plant 5 new oak trees. And that generates an environmental improvement. And so I'm curious why Mendocino has chosen to implement prohibition over remediation, which would allow for both environmental and economic benefit. So those are my two questions, the definition of removal and prohibition over remediation. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Kelly. Definition of removal, we are talking about any tree that has been separated from its trunk. So that is what we're talking about for removal here, because the trees have been felled. And that was really the concern of the Board of Supervisors when they put this policy in place back in 2017, was the felling of trees. And the reason why we aren't focused on mitigation or remediation, which would be great, but the ordinance doesn't provide the pathway for that. So when the board put the prohibition into the ordinance, when they developed 10A17, they did not include language that allowed the department to consider mitigations and remediations for the tree removal. So we're just working within the parameters of what's been provided us. I can't say that we love the parameters of what's been providing us, but it would take an ordinance change for us to amend or adjust how vegetation modification is handled in the county. So our next caller, and then we have one more caller after this one, and then we will still make time available for future agenda items. Rest assured, I apologize that we're running over. I just want to make sure that folks have an opportunity to ask their question, hopefully. So Chantel, you are our next caller, so you should be able to unmute your device and start your comment.
Good morning. Thank you, Kristen. Most of my written questions have been answered along the way. My last one is, will remote sensing imagery be viable as evidence, or is it only limited to aerial imagery?
Would you repeat that? I didn't catch. Will you please repeat your question?
Sure. My question was, first I made a comment that thanks, my other questions that I put up into the chat have been answered along the way via other people's questions and answers. The last one that I have that has not yet been answered is specifically comparing remote sensing imagery with aerial imagery. Will remote sensing imagery be viable as evidence in place of aerial imagery? What I've found in my GIS professional work is that access to aerial imagery around the range of dates to show whether it was pre or post 5/4/17 has not provided the resolution that's needed to go in and see tree by tree to counter the aerial imagery that was provided by the county. But I have been able to make some progress with remote sensing that is based upon refraction, light, and can identify like tree versus ground or tree versus water. So my question again is, remote sensing, is that viable or only aerial imagery?
I would suggest, Chantal, that you turn in remote sensing imagery. I can't say that we have received any remote sensing imagery for us to review and consider. So I don't have a solid answer for you at this time, but please do turn it in if we have questions about it. We will work with County Council and the provider of that imagery to answer those questions and see how we might be able to work with remote sensing imagery.
I'd prefer like a more clear yes. Sorry to push back, but I don't want to purchase because the subscriptions are so expensive for the range of dates and the square kilometers in order to cover a large number of properties. It's kind of a jump into a cost item that is not necessarily going to get us to where we want to go.
Yeah, I can't answer your question currently. So I will
thank you.
Run that up the flagpole, so to speak. Apologies. Okay, our next caller and last caller for this section is going to be phone caller identified. Last four digits of your phone number appear to be 8857. So caller ending in 8857. You should be able to unmute your microphone. There you go. We've got you.
Hello. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I was curious about how trees are being identified as whether or not they are trees that could or could not be removed, and wondering about trees that were potentially removed for reasons that were legally to be removed and not something that is not allowed in the ordinance, and that folks need to provide, as you're saying, documentation for those things. Yet how would they have known that they needed to create documentation if they weren't doing something that they didn't think they couldn't do, or that they were doing things that they could do, and that they're going to have to provide documentation, that they don't have documentation that was created beforehand of that removal when it was lawful removal.
Is that the end of your comment, caller? I'll try to.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, how would people know? People would know. It has been in the ordinance since the ordinance went into effect on May 4th of 2017. So, hopefully folks who are engaged in the program have reviewed the ordinance to understand what prohibitions are in place and what compliance requirements are in place. But it is documented in the ordinance, the prohibition on tree removal. So we are not defining trees. We are looking at impacts to species. So commercial species, true oaks, and tan oaks. That is what is in the ordinance. So it really is a modification of the species that are prohibited from being modified or removed. So that is what we're looking at, not necessarily defining tree. Okay, so with that said, I do want to make sure that we spend some time and do a quick round for items, future agenda items. If there are folks that would like to comment and provide us information on what they feel should be future agenda items, I will ask you to please do raise your hand. We're going to limit these comments to 1 minute as we are a little woefully over time currently. So first commenter, future agenda items. Julia, you should be able to go ahead and unmute your device and please go ahead and start your comment.
Thank you, Kristen. I would like to see CEQA on the next meeting agenda, and specifically, how do the Mendocino County applicants address CEQA requirements required by the state, that the CEQA review committee at the state is requesting verification from the county and getting no response. I'm actually sending a letter this afternoon about this specific question, but what's happening is there is a disconnect regarding CEQA in general. And even though Appendix G is CEQA, for people in the portal that haven't been issued a permit, they don't have an option to do Appendix G. and the county isn't identifying with the state how to address that. And we really should be talking about this. Thank you kindly.
Yeah, and Julia, just really quick on that comment, and everyone really, we have a meeting scheduled next week to actually have this conversation with the state so we know for sure how we can show or work with applicants to make sure that they have the proof of progress they need to continue forward, especially those who are in the application state and not eligible to submit their Appendix G. So I don't have answers for you today, but I should hopefully by next meeting after we have our meeting with the state. Okay, Chantel, you are next up for future agenda items. You should be able to unmute your microphone.
Great, thank you. Here I go. I'm 1 second ahead. Okay, my agenda items, it sounds like a repeat from past meetings. The appeals process, everything CEQA, devote a whole meeting to that, please. And everything related to the parameters for phase 3 application requirements. That's all for now. Thanks, I'll take my hand down.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you for those comments. And our next commenter is going to be Paul Hansberry and possibly Susan Timmon. We'll find out. Paul, I have provided, yep, you're unmuted and you can go ahead and start your comment.
Hi, yes, I'm just wondering about this outside counsel. Rumor has it that they were brought in to try to eliminate the workload and eliminate applicants from the program and weed them out. They seem to be pretty zealous in the policies that they're creating and the interpretations of the ordinance. Whereas the ordinance, said commercial and tan oaks and oaks, because tan oaks aren't a true quercus. That seems pretty broad, but then now we're getting down into specifics where there's different kinds of trees. Also, I wanted to find out about, where do you determine the cultivation site? There's so many caveats, there's so many exceptions to these things that the burden of proving a negative seems overly onerous, and the policies that are being created, it seems to be by outside counsel, seems to be overly onerous. So can you address that? Thank you.
Okay, seeing no additional comments, I will do my best to address the last commenter's questions quickly. I am going to also, based on the request of, my apologies, a previous caller, go back to and post the commercial species slides. Speaking to specifically how we got to this list of commercial species, CAL FIRE provides the list of commercial species. They have an ordinance that identifies the commercial species lists. And so we are utilizing the commercial species list as provided in the ordinance put forth by CAL FIRE. So that is not based on a determination from outside counsel. It is based on how the language in the ordinance identifies the term commercial species, and then CAL FIRE is the responsible party for determining a commercial species. So up currently is the Coast Forest District commercial species list. And then I'm going to flip next to the Northern Forest District list. If you need or desire a copy of this list, just email us, cannabisprogram@mendocinocounty.org. We will send over the list, actually the ordinance from CAL FIRE identifying these lists. Outside counsel was put in place to assist the department with policies and denials and making sure that as we conduct denials, we are doing so in a lawful and appropriate manner. So they are working with us on policies and denials. So that is what I have. I want to thank everyone for joining us. We do have a lot of questions about CEQA and Appendix G. I see a number of folks in the Q&A have asked for a CEQA meeting. So I will circle back with staff, but at this point, I would say it's likely that our next meeting will be on CEQA based on feedback from this meeting and our last week's meeting. But we will send out the link to today's presentation after we adjourn, and that will include an agenda for next week's meeting. So please do make sure that you are in the Canada Notes notification system. This is how we're notifying these meetings and getting agendas out. So if you received the meeting information because a friend or a colleague forwarded it to you, just go to the Mendocino County page and sign up for Canada Notes. And also, please do share the meeting with other folks who may be interested. So we thank everyone for attending. We're going to go ahead and we're going to close the webinar, and we look forward to having our next weekly meeting next Friday. So we will see and talk to all of you then.